Come back into your full life force. Stop playing in all these idle dreams and fantasies that you are separate from God and separate from Source, because what have you ever gotten from playing in this dream of separation other than pain and suffering, guilt, loss, shame, embarrassment, bitterness, anger, envy, unworthiness, division, loneliness, and death? You are not separate from God. You are not separate from Source. You are not separate from the divine. You are not separate from the universe. And playing the game of separation has served you nothing but pain and suffering. And the ego likes playing this game of separation because it gives us the feeling of having our own separate individual identity. But guess what? You don't have one, because we're all one. And if you don't like me, bad luck, because I'm you and you're me, and we're all one, and we all come from the same source, we all come from the same home, we all come from the same place, and we are all a part of the same family, whether you like it or not. You do not have a separate individual identity. And that very thing is the thing that's causing you so much suffering. This need to be separate, to be an individual, to split yourself off from Source and from God and from the divine is the thing that's causing you suffering. And the program sounds really healthy, right? Like, be your own person and be independent and be self-made. You are not self-made. You are not your own person, really, because we're reflections of each other. We are all a part of a oneness that we have now lost the awareness of, and now we're all suffering because of it. Yes, we are all unique expressions of the divine, but we all come from the divine. And yes, we are all unique slices of the infinite, but at the end of the day, we all come from infinity. And this scares the ego because the ego was born out of separation. And I know the term ego has a lot of different definitions, and sometimes I use different definitions as well, but for this specific video, I'm talking about the ego as just being an idea of separation and wanting to be separate from Source, which is what we've all been sinking into, and that's what has been causing us so much suffering. But to come back into your power, you need to go back to the oneness, back to the wholeness. The ego has no power for the exact reason that it is separate from God. And you are not separate from God. Once you go back to the oneness, the awareness of the oneness and the wholeness, that's where your power is. That's what I mean when I say come back into your full life force. Because you are splitting your life force energy by trying to be this separate individual identity when you're not, when we are all a part of one. We are all interconnected with one another, and you can't escape that fact. And the fact that you're trying to escape it is the thing that's causing you the suffering. So the ego feels it wants to be separate, then it feels a void, then it feels empty, then it feels broken, and what does it do? It looks outside itself to try fill that void that it's actually created itself. It's really messed up when you actually think about it. But we start looking outside ourselves to fill that void within, which doesn't actually exist because we are always whole. It's just our awareness, we lose the awareness of it. But what Spirit wanted me to talk about was when we don't feel whole, we are in a state of yearning. We are in a state of fear. And when we're in a state of fear, we get into that fight or flight response. We get into survival mode. We get into that desperation to fill that void at whatever cost it takes. And this is when we can hurt other people and use people to fill that void and not respect other people. And that's what Spirit wanted me to talk about. That if your yearning is so strong, which it is, and you don't have to be ashamed of that, because when you don't feel whole, you're yearning to feel whole. And that yearning is so strong because it's your natural state to be in wholeness and to be in oneness. It's totally fine. And don't be ashamed of how strong that yearning is to fill that void within, because I know exactly how you're feeling. That yearning is so strong because your soul wants to feel that wholeness again. It wants to feel that oneness. It doesn't want to be separate. It doesn't want to have its own separate individual identity. That's the ego's story. That's the ego's game. And we're not dealing with that game anymore. Just look around and see how many people are depressed and anxious and freaking out and not happy anymore. It's because we need to start remembering the oneness and the wholeness. And that yearning is really strong to try to pull us back. But sometimes that yearning is so strong that we act out of desperation and we hurt other people, we use other people, will abuse drugs, alcohol, whatever it is for you. By the way, that alcohol is not mine. This is not my house. And when we're yearning, we don't feel whole, right? So we cannot show up fully as our true selves, and we also can't respect other people because we'll have these underlying ulterior motives of using external things to fill that void within us. And we need to stop looking outside ourselves to fill that void within. We need to also face the fact that, yeah, we're all feeling a void right now. We're all feeling an emptiness in some way, and we need to figure out how to fill that. But it's not by being this separate individual identity. That is the thing that's making us feel the void, if that makes sense. This is a really hard message to try to translate, and it's like it's coming through really messy. But the fact that we think that there's a hole within us, that's an illusion, because we are whole with a W. That's literally what Spirit said. Don't cringe at it. That's literally what the message is. But there's all this programming of wanting to be separate, like a kid wanting to split off from his family unit. We are wanting to be separate from God, separate from Source, and be our own person and be a somebody and build our own life and be self-made. And that's the issue, because firstly, you are not self-made, you are not separate, you are not your own person really, because we're all reflections of each other and we're all one. And this is like a really confusing message, and I hope it's making sense for people, but I'm trying my best here. The ego is always trying to strip us away from the awareness of our oneness, because that's how the ego stays alive. For this ego definition of being that thought and that entity of separation that lives within us and controls our life, it needs to keep perpetuating the story of separation. So what is perpetuating the story of separation in you? Is it that my boyfriend left me, my parents left me, I was abandoned, I'm traumatized, I was abused, I was assaulted, I'm alone, I don't feel safe? Whatever it is, there is some story in your mind that's playing out that's perpetuating this story of separation and not feeling like you're a part of the group, you're not a part of this family that we all are. And we're all starting to retract and go, well, stuff this, I'm going to be my own person, I'm going to make a life for myself because I've been betrayed or because I've been abandoned or whatever your story is. I'm going to go do it myself. But that just causes more suffering because you're not going home, because oneness is your home, Source is your home. And any effort to try and create a life separate from God and separate from the divine and separate from Source is only hurting you and causing you suffering. And the ego is wanting to create separate from Source, separate from God, but you actually can't create separate from God because you are a co-creator, you are God, you are a mirror of God. And if you are an extension of Source energy, you cannot create anything other than another extension of Source energy. You can't do anything separate. If you are separate from Source, separate from all that is and all that there ever will be, all you're doing is creating illusions. You might think that you're seeing things and you're creating things, but they're illusions, they're self-deceptions, they're false. And when you go home, when you go back to Source, then you'll turn around and look back and see all the illusions that you've made, all the smoke and mirrors, like none of it was real. This is a really hard message, I keep saying that, but like trying to describe like how deep these illusions go like into our psyche, it's really tricky for me to explain. But you cannot create anything separate from God, because you are that. You are God. And the ego is insisting that we do. The ego is insisting that we create something separate, that we be separate from God and be our own person and be our own human. And society's kind of bought into that program as well, of being your own person and being an individual, when we're not really an individual, because we're all part of the oneness. So we've made ourselves separate from God, or we've attempted it and we have the illusion that we think we have. Then we feel a void, we feel an emptiness. We then feel a yearning to fill that. We have a desperation to fill that void, and we look externally and we're in fight or flight response. We are in survival mode and we don't feel safe. And then I asked, okay, Spirit, you're telling me all this stuff, but what do we do with this? Yes, we know we cannot look externally anymore to fill a void. It might fill it for a week, a month, a couple months, however long, but it's not permanent. To permanently feel whole and to fill that void, to fill the hole and to come back to whole with the W, we need to do it ourselves, and we need to connect back to God, connect back to source, which is who we are, connect back home. So then with Spirit telling me that we have to fill the void ourselves, I was like, okay, great, we know that now, but how do we do that? How do we fill the void? And of course, Spirit answered, love, because love is always the answer. Love is all there is. That is who we are. Of course, Spirit would say that, but I wanted more information to try help you and not have this be a super vague message that doesn't help you. Love is ever present. So for us to feel whole, for us to feel love, which is who we are, to feel ourselves, we need to be present. And we need to let go of the past. We need to let go of all our stories and all the things that we're attaching to, including our identity, our egoic identity, our past, all the things that have led up to create who we are now. We kind of have to let that go and just be present in the love that is here right now. And like Bob Marley said, there is just one love. We're all it. We're all interconnected. We're all one. There is no separation. That's the belief we need to wipe out. We need to remember the oneness, to feel the wholeness, to fill the void inside of us. And I was asking Spirit, I need more than that. This needs to be able to help people. And I'm sorry that this is just really vague. This is all they came back with, but it was just, you just need to let yourself go home. You just need to let yourself go back to source. Stop pulling away. From source, you're pulling away like a rubber band, trying to be a kid leaving the nest, trying to be independent and grow up and be separate from source and separate from God. Stop pulling away. When you release the resistance, like a rubber band, you will fly back home. Spirit was like, that's how easy it is. You just need to let go, release the resistance and surrender, and you will fly back home. That's all it is. And it's you don't have to do the breath work, and you can do breath work, you can meditate, you can do self-scripts, you can look in the mirror and say that you love yourself, you can do your self-love journaling, all that. But Spirit said at the end of the day, all you have to do is just let go and surrender, and you'll fly home. It's just like you are just in a rubber band right now, and that's why it's so painful. That's why it's such a struggle. That's why we're all going through so much suffering, is because we're pulling so hard and being so insistent on, no, I want to be an individual. No, I want to be separate. Just go back to the oneness. Just let yourself go home, because your soul will naturally fly back there. It's just us fighting it, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot, and we are our biggest block. No, our ego is our biggest block. Our egoic identity is the biggest block, and that's what we need to wipe out. And that's what people talk about, the ego death and stuff. It's wiping out that belief of separation, wiping out the fear to come back to that one love, come back to the interconnectedness of everyone and everything, and that we are all a part of the one. We are all made of love, and we will not feel separate. We will not feel alone. We will not feel the pain and the depression and the anxiety anymore, and we won't feel alone, and we won't have all those stories playing in that survival mode of going, I need to make something of myself, I need to do it myself because I don't feel safe, and I need to do this because I feel alone, blah, 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 blah. When you feel the oneness, you lose the fear, because the oneness is where the love is. When you're present, that's where the one is. That's where the love is. It's all connected. And I know this message might sound really messy. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up this video because the downloads are coming through so messy right now, but I hope this message is getting to the right person, because it seemed like an urgent message. I had to make the video tonight, even if it comes out messy. I hope you get it. But basically, the message is, Spirit is just saying for you to let go of the idea that you need to be a separate identity, because that's the thing that's causing your suffering. This pulling away from source, this rubber band sensation of this resistance and this pulling away. Why are you pulling away from everything you want? Source is everything. That's everything you want is there. All the love, all the happiness, the joy, the presence, it's all in source. Why are we pulling away? Spirit is saying, just stop shooting yourself in the foot, let go, release the rubber band, and you'll fly home. You want to feel whole? Go back to the oneness. Stop wasting your time seeking externally, trying to find a person or a Prada bag or a car or a fancy house or, fame, fortune, status, whatever it is, to fill that void. Stop pulling, just let go, and you'll go home and you'll go back to source, and you'll feel that wholeness and you'll feel that oneness again. And letting go of your ego identity as well kind of reminds me of the Joe Dispenza teachings of when you're meditating and you go from some time to no time, something to no thing, someone to no one. That's the goal, right? But from the ego's point of view, going from a someone to a no one, that seems really self-deprecating and really scary, and going, why would I want to be, the whole hype is to be a someone. Why would I go from someone to no one? I don't want to be no one. But that's what we have to do. We have to flip it. The programming to be a somebody, to be someone to someone else, to be someone to the world, to be an impact, to make an influence. Just be a part of the oneness, and you'll be a part of the divine plan, and you'll do everything that you're meant to do anyway. Stop trying to pull and resist and try and create and force your own journey and force your own path, because that's not how it works. That's why you're so depressed, because you're fighting against the divine. You're trying to pull away from source, and it's just not working, because you're always there, no matter what. So this meditation that Joe Dispenza talks about of going from someone to no one, that's what we have to do. And it seems scary to the ego, but you're not losing yourself. You can never lose yourself. You're only losing your ego. You're losing your egoic identity. You're losing the idea of separation, so you can then remember the oneness. And that's what we want. We want to lose the egoic identity. We want to lose the fear so we can remember the love. And at the end of the day, we're just losing everything that we're not, so we remember who we are and we can go home. You're losing your ego, but your ego is not yourself. It is an illusion of self that you've created, and we're letting that go. We're letting go all of the illusions so we can go back to truth, we can go back to source, we can go back to love, we can go back to light, and we can go back home. And I hope that this message made sense.